The Nigerian economy is in the throes of contraction thanks to the lockdown imposed by President Muhammadu Buhari as part of measures to beat back the coronavirus pandemic. But this coming at a cost. From job losses to trade agreements and contractual obligations, all now hanging in the balance. Local as well as multinational entities are facing a moment business leaders wish never became reality. Judge Etomi of Judge Etomi and Partners. Etomi is the former head of the Nigerian Bar Association section on business law. He joins me from Ikoyi in Lagos. It's great to have you join us, Mr. Etomi.
Thank you, Turin. How are you doing today?
Great. First of all, these are unprecedented times for the Nigerian business community. Just when it blows over, does Nigeria business law have the capacity to deal with the fallout?
Well, it is, you correctly put it, the disruption is going to be monumental. It will be unprecedented because of the widespread nature this one would be. And then, of course, we will deal with capacity issues of our courts to handle the myriads of litigations that will come about as a result of failed contracts. What's happening now is that there's going to be a slowdown globally. The global economy is going to slow down, and there is a global recession. Nigeria would not be exempted from this recession, and what you will then find would be breaches of contracts in hydra-headed fashion. And like you correctly put it, from employment contracts through to your regular contracts for supplies, your contracts for construction, just think about everything. If you have a supply chain contract that involves importation of goods and materials from abroad, and the the manufacturer is itself affected by COVID-19 and so cannot supply, you, the importer, you've collected money from your customers, you can't deliver because you also don't have, you've committed them. The funds will be lost somewhere, but nobody really is a net beneficiary. Something is just basically lost. Then the issue then becomes, how do we then apportion this loss in a manner that would be fair across the board? In many instances, the concept of force majeure, which is the principle of law that protects potential breaches in contracts to have obligations suspended on account of some supervening incidents like we have with this pandemic. And the principle is it's got to be an event like nobody foresaw, nobody could even arguably avoid. And then now it is making it impossible for you to perform the contract. Now, force majeure clauses can usually save a contract in the sense that it suspends the obligations until the event of force majeure blows over, and then you can then resume obligations. Now, if you don't have a force majeure clause in your contract, then the other option open to you is the legal principle of law called frustration, which essentially means that on account of this supervening event, the contract has been frustrated, and you're now asking the courts to terminate the contract. And those will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, because there are so many exemptions to these rules. We don't have enough time to go through these exemptions. But one thing I would, let me say, appeal to potential litigants to understand is that not even the courts will have the answers. In many instances, the courts have tried to rewrite the contract, but it's been the principle of give and take and some degree of cushioning of the damage that can help every one of us tide ourselves over this very difficult period and then begin to look forward to new things to come. I'm sure many people would have paid for flights before today. Many airlines we know today are not refunding fares. We don't even know when they will start flying. So if you ask and your money is not coming and you're not sure when you fly, what's your resort? And you've paid for a holiday, full package, hotel, everything. Hotels have not been functioning. Post COVID-19, we don't even know when they will start to reopen, because when economies globally begin to reopen, they will reopen in installments. And one of the last places that will be open will be the tourism industry, because you don't want large groupings just immediately after the pandemic.
Of course.
So there's so much to talk about. But one dispute resolution mechanism in law that seems to be gaining ground is that of mediation and conciliation. It doesn't require the full force of the legal system. It can actually be by responsible members of society, your church leaders, your chiefs, and it's the good old traditional means of pacifying people and getting people to take a little bit of the hit on a give and take basis. If, for example, I gave you money to do something and you haven't done it, but you've not parted with all of the money, then it stands to reason for you to give me a part of it back. It will be unreasonable for me to ask for everything back, but at the same time, you should not keep everything when you have not actually performed the contract and then hide under the fact that because of COVID, you couldn't go forward with it. So give and take will be the principle under which a lot of these disputes will be resolved.
Mr. Tommy, we're talking dollars, millions of dollars here, because the IMF and World Bank was out to talk about losses that could come up, talking about agreements and disagreements, talking about contractual agreements like we're talking about. Now, the federal government talked about setting up an interministerial committee to keep the economy functioning in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic. But in what way do you really think we can maximize private sector participation to save the economy? Already we knew the state at which we were growing even before this came up.
Yes. Now, the private sector would really have to partner with the government. Or let me put it differently. The government must reach out to the private sector to help support any of the stimulus packages they are doing to help alleviate the horror which you just described. And this must be taken seriously, because the private sector in totality actually employs more people. And there is this worry that up to I saw some reports where they are talking about up to 150 million jobs in Africa will be lost. That is humongous. I mean, in a continent where many of us live from hand to mouth or from day to day or month to month, to lose 150 million jobs, it's going to be humongous. And if you break it down to Nigeria, you noted our growth was even slow. Now, oil prices, as a result of this pandemic, have hit an all-time low at a time when our reserves are also compromised. And then our ability to pay even the minimum wage that was agreed will also be greatly impacted. So even the government itself will need help. And the government has come up with its own stimulus packages. The CBN has announced quite a number of packages. The committee set up by the government, cutting across various ministries, departments, and agencies, are also looking at what can be done. But what is very critical at this point is that we must win ourselves out of this dollar economy, because benchmarking most of the things we've done in the past of the dollar is what's keeping us where we are today. You can't even meaningfully hold your naira in your hand and get the true value of it except you benchmark it with the dollar. We must begin to look inward for the solutions to most of our problems. And what would be the key areas here? Food security. We're rich in agriculture, so we should stop paying lip service to the revolution, the agricultural revolution. We must now begin to act it out. We go back to the farms, we patronize the homemade things. Food should be largely processed here. And we should, if we begin to create a vibrant economy around food security, that takes maybe 50% out of our problems. You can already see from what what's going on with the lockdown. It's more the hunger virus, as many people are calling it. That's more potent than the COVID virus. So people don't want to understand. So we must address food security. And then what about other things? Maintenance. We must develop maintenance culture. In this country, we just build and destroy, build and destroy. We don't even have a way of maintaining the things we do. We have to go back in there. Construction. Build roads. These roads don't have to be Appian ways, my apologies to the Romans and all that. They can be just good, straightforward roads constructed within Nigeria to give you access to the remote locations where most of our farms are, so that farm produce is then transported easily to areas where they can be sold. So many of our solutions we can begin to look onward. We should stop the looking down on made in Nigeria stuff, or it was made in Aba, made in Onitsha, and all that. Really and truly, the new economy should center around patronizing those things, so that if we can be less dependent on imports, then this slavery to the dollar will be largely reduced. And then we can then begin to grow our economy, challenge the genius in the average Nigerian, which I know is there, and we can then begin to sort of work our way out of it. Don't forget, we fought a civil war, at the end of which we didn't owe a kobo, thanks to the way the economy was managed. I'm talking about the economy. We must also look for the right people at this point.
Indeed.
I am a little bit fed up with trying to patch everything, trying to compromise everything. We cannot continue to celebrate mediocrity ahead of quality.
Mr. Etomi, allow me to interject you. I'm really enjoying detailed answers that you're giving us, reacting to all of these questions. But I'd like to know quickly what significant ways you see this pandemic reshaping the face of commercial transactions, given the strain this has already put on major economies of the world. You talked about congregating and all of that. It can't just start immediately. So what effect, what do you see? What reshaping do you see coming up?
In fact, many people are beginning to rethink how they do business. Let us start even from the boardrooms. Do we all really have to congregate in one place before we have a board meeting? Happily, the Nigerian Stock Exchange just recently released some guidelines on virtual board meetings. This is going to be a permanent feature going forward. The same thing goes for even schooling. Take my profession, for example. We churn out between 6,000 and 8,000 lawyers who are stationed in various locations in the law school. And then we then congregate them in one place and then call them individually to the bar. Now, until there is a vaccine to make everyone feel safe about large congregations, we must begin to rethink how we do our law school education. We have to look at online classes, online examinations, and you call people to the bar. I mean, it's happening in some jurisdictions, and I really begin to think we should give serious thought to it. Let's stay with the profession. Courts, our courts are closed today. That is a huge problem because it means litigants are deprived of the means to settle disputes. That's not good for society. That's not good for harmony. Our courts must also go online. So maybe decisions and litigations should be taken over Zoom, over Skype, the way that we're doing. You have the litigants in court, you have the lawyers, you have a judge, and all that. So you don't have to clog up a courtroom. In fact, it will make justice dispensation easier because in advance, all the documents are sent to the opposing parties. You go through it, you synthesize your argument, you place it before the judge. He or she fixes a hearing date, which is time bound. Each of you has 30 minutes, 40 minutes. You make your case, and they come to adjudication, and then it goes for enforcement. So a lot of habits will have to change. You see, COVID is not anything anybody wished for, but nothing goes into nothing. Out of this COVID, a lot of good can come out. Again, businesses. Do we all have to rush to be on the road every day going to work? What COVID is telling me and do is that we can actually, many of us can work from home.
From home?
And actually see a situation, from home. And I actually see a situation in which to reduce the traffic on the road, many offices will be asking staff to rotate when they find themselves on the road. Because many times we spend inefficient hours trying to get from point A to point B in the name of going to work. Wow. 2-3 hours, By the time you get to work, you're exhausted, you are not productive, and all the thought on your mind is how you get back home. And this has become a ritual, become part of what? So low quality life all around. What COVID is telling me and you is that we can change that manner of doing business.
Indeed.
And I see that happening going forward. And do you
Indeed.
know what the next effect will be? It will be very productive. Employees will now be put on time sheets, and real time, on time, you can measure their productivity and pay them accordingly. So no room for loafers, because you know one of the biggest
Mr. George.
distractions in an office, those who are not working distract those who are working.
Indeed.
Seriously.
Mr. George,
So,
you
but
told
when
me.
you're online,
I
yes,
must thank you for your time. This is what time can take. Former head of the NDA Business Law Section. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your contributions in Business Nigeria.